Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into Guns for General Washington. It's an incredible story about how a bookseller with a totally wild idea literally changed the course of the American Revolution. So if you've got a quiz coming up on this book, you are in the right place. We're going to cover every key point you need to absolutely ace it. Okay, so let's get right into it. The whole story kicks off with a massive problem. The year is 1775. The American Revolution is just getting started, and General George Washington's Continental Army, they are completely, hopelessly stuck in a siege around Boston. I mean, the situation was a total deadlock. On one hand, you have the Continental Army, full of these brave volunteers, and they control all the land surrounding Boston. But on the other, you have the British Royal Navy, and with their powerful warships, they basically own the harbor. So the Americans can't get the British out, and the British can't break the siege. And here's the critical weakness, the thing you have to remember for your quiz. The rebels had no heavy cannons. Without that kind of artillery, they were pretty much powerless to attack.
So right into this frustrating stalemate steps Colonel Henry Knox. Now get this. He wasn't some career soldier. He was a Boston bookseller who had taught himself everything there was to know about military engineering and artillery from the very books he sold. He goes to Washington with this proposal that is so audacious, so seemingly impossible, that it just might work. He calls it the Noble Train of Artillery. Knox's mission was just staggering. He proposed to travel 300 miles in the dead of winter all the way to the captured Fort Ticonderoga in New York. The plan? He would gather a massive haul of captured British cannons and then drag them all the way back to Boston. We're talking across frozen lakes, over treacherous mountains, and through deep, deep snow. This was a journey that was going to test the absolute limits of human endurance.
And the scale of this operation was just immense. We are not talking about a few small guns here. Knox and his team had to transport 59 pieces of heavy artillery. Some of these iron cannons weighed over 2 tons each. Just try to imagine hauling that much weight through a total wilderness with no roads in the middle of a brutal winter. It's just incredible. And yeah, this was anything but a simple trip. At one point, they get to the Mohawk River, but the ice is way too thin to hold the heaviest cannon. So what do? Well, they chop holes in the ice, letting water flood the surface and freeze night after night just to build up thicker and thicker layers. It was pure genius. But even then, disaster struck when the very last and largest cannon plunged right through the ice into the freezing water. But through just sheer grit and amazing teamwork, they managed to haul that precious cannon right back out. But look, this incredible feat wasn't a one-man show. Not at all. So for your quiz, who are the key players you really need to know? Let's meet them. First up, of course, is the mastermind himself, Colonel Henry Knox. It's just amazing to think that the guy with the plan to solve the Army's biggest problem wasn't some seasoned general, but a Boston bookseller whose passion for this stuff came from the very books he sold. You know, Knox was really the perfect man for an impossible job. He had the intellect of a bookseller combined with this rugged determination. He was a master of logistics, a really creative problem solver, but what truly defined him as a leader was his deep commitment to his team's safety. This is a guy who earned Washington's complete trust because he balanced that big ambition with real caution.
This quote really gets right to the heart of his motivation, doesn't it? These questions capture the absolute desperation of the Continental Army. Knox knew that without serious firepower, their fight for independence was probably doomed. So for him, this wasn't just a job. It was an absolute necessity for the revolution to survive.
But Henry wasn't alone on this journey. He was joined by his younger brother, Will. And Will's personal story is a fantastic example of another key theme in this book. See, Will starts out as this restless teenager, kind of bored with Army life and just idolizing his older brother. But this grueling journey, it forges him into a responsible leader. He learns to think quickly under pressure, he even saves a young boy from a runaway cannon, and he becomes a mentor himself. Will's journey really shows us how the revolution forced young people to grow up incredibly fast and take on huge responsibilities. And finally, of course, there's the commander who staked the entire fate of Boston on Henry Knox's crazy plan. The book portrays Washington not just as this brilliant strategist, but as a really nurturing leader. He understood how desperate they were for artillery, and he had the wisdom to trust his people.
He saw the potential in Knox and gave him the confidence to go out and try the impossible. And when those cannons finally arrived, it was Washington who orchestrated the final, masterful checkmate at Dorchester Heights.
Okay, so beyond the plot and the characters, your quiz is almost certainly going to ask you about the major themes. There are two you really need to grasp. The first big idea is simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Cannons change everything. The book makes it crystal clear that heavy artillery was the pivotal, game-changing asset in 18th century warfare. It could completely shift the balance of power and decide the outcome of a siege without a single major battle even being fought. And the contrast is just stark. Before Knox, the Continental Army was stuck in this defensive, frustrating stalemate. After Knox, they held a completely dominant strategic position. The British fleet, which was once totally secure in the harbor, was suddenly a sitting duck. The arrival of those cannons single-handedly turned a hopeless situation into a decisive victory. Okay, the second key theme is this. History isn't just made by famous generals. The revolution was really won by the combined efforts, the skills, and the sacrifices of countless everyday people, all working together. This quote from the book just captures it perfectly. The noble train wasn't crewed by professional soldiers, no way. It was powered by farmers who knew how to handle oxen, lumberjacks who were used to hard living, and blacksmiths who could make repairs on the fly. It was their collective effort that made the impossible possible. So, what was the ultimate results of all this blood, sweat, and frozen tears? Why is this one specific story so important to the bigger picture of the American Revolution? Because it worked. It actually worked. In early March of 1776, under the cover of darkness, Washington's army secretly hauled all of Knox's cannons up Dorchester Heights, this perfect strategic spot overlooking the entire city and harbor. When the British woke up the next morning, they were absolutely shocked to see two massive forts armed with heavy guns aimed right down at them. Their position had become completely indefensible. The result was the liberation of Boston, and this was a massive turning point. It wasn't just a military victory, it was a huge psychological one. It proved to the entire world, and maybe more importantly to the colonists themselves, that their little ragtag army could outthink, outplan, and outmaneuver the most powerful empire on Earth. It gave them the hope they so desperately needed to keep the fight going. And that is your essential breakdown of Guns for General Washington. It's an amazing story of logistics, leadership, and the real power of ordinary people. And it kind of leaves us with a final thought, right? That same spirit of creative problem solving and sheer determination is just as relevant today as it was back then. All right, good luck on your quiz.